We're back with another Crowd Control. It's been a minute, but we are here with a very special midweek episode of Crowd Control. We wanted to catch things up, maybe try to even have another one back on track next week. But this week we're going to talk about some campaigns that are running, some that launched just earlier this week. We've got 4 campaigns, maybe 5 to talk about.
This was a huge week, so we didn't want to miss this, even though we were at Origins, which was a ton of fun, kind of pushed things back a little bit. But we are here to talk about this. And the first one I want to talk about is Skytear Horde campaigns. This is a game that I've actually covered before. I found it very appealing because the artwork, graphic design, presentation of this game is awesome.
It's a beautiful looking game. It looks a lot like Hearthstone.
It does, and it's TCG. It feels like a TCG, which is right up my alley. I love card games, and it's like a castle defense, and you're playing cooperatively to kind of defend this castle, and it's a great one-off little game. But what they've done with this new expansion, Campaigns, is they've turned it into more of a campaign game. They're going to have a ton of different scenario cards, and when you start to play, you're actually going to play over 4 scenarios. Now, this is not narrative scenarios, so to speak.
No, it sounds just like a modular way of playing that extends the length of the game.
It does. It extends the length of the game. You carry the same health value across all, so you basically have to go run the gauntlet of 4 different campaigns and then be a giant boss. So they have these new cards as well that represent the final bosses you're going to fight. And I've seen they showed one that was like a dragon that took up all 4 card slots.
Yeah, it's really
for its multiple heads.
The look of this alone has always been appealing to me. We covered this. You covered it back on the channel a long time ago. It's a really good looking game. The next one, also a good looking game. This one is a big dungeon crawler. One of a couple like this in terms of at least the miniatures.
Yeah.
But that is Odalin. We actually have content up on the channel. Jeremy Howard put this up earlier this week. He has a full, I think, 24-minute preview. So if you really want to deep dive with a lot of information on it, you can check that. But I wanted to give you one highlight. First of all, this is a dungeon crawling, beautiful miniatures. It's got those miniatures now that all the games have with like half translucent colored plastic, half not. But really cool, gorgeous looking game. The interesting twist that I think is the most interesting thing about this game is the card play. There are these cards. First of all, it has kind of a card crafting mechanism. So there's going to be sleeves with a top and a bottom to the card. But the actual play of those cards, the top of the cards are what you're going to play and you're going to do your thing on your turn. The bottoms of the cards are exclusively for off turn. So it's going to give you an ability that maybe you can do, but that ability is only when you're playing off turn. So it's a way, I think, design-wise, to keep everyone at the table somewhat engaged in what's happening because they're just like sitting there waiting to pounce with the things that they can do on the bottoms of their cards, which I think is really cool. The other big hook to the game is there's this balance track. I can't remember, it's like chaos and I suppose order. I'm not sure the exact words, but there's this balance track and it sounds like a lot of the things you do in the game just to play it are also going to mess with that balance track. If it's in balance, I think that's good. If it's not in balance, and I think if it's not in balance either way, it's not so good because, like, for instance, when you defeat a monster and it's not in balance, you have to flip over some sort of event card. Now, maybe the event cards are good on one side, maybe they're bad on the other. You'll have to ask Jeremy Howard to find out because we haven't played it. Really interesting looking game. And again, it's one of those not just big box, but big boxes. I think the all-in is like a few $100s or something like that.
And we've got another one that people are going to compare to Odalin. It's Blood. And I think that this Blood versus Odalin debate is happening across social media right now.
They launched on the same day,
They launched on the same day. They are similar, but not really. Blood is not really a traditional dungeon crawler. It's a boss battler.
Yeah.
You do kind of play out through a campaign of multiple bosses that you fight with the goal of eventually defeating Dracula and kind of powering up in between. So there is kind of like a campaign through it, but it really is just a boss battle. You pick a boss and you fight them. But it does have a lot of cool things, I think, going for it. First of all, the theme is cool. It's like a dark carnival. You're playing like a troupe who are also monster hunters. And the whole thing, like the art style, graphic design has that kind of like
It's also got those miniatures with the plastic.
And again, the miniatures are awesome. The boss miniatures are cool. There's a variety of different bosses. But what the hook here for this game, it's programming. And it's a little bit of push your luck because cooperatively, you're playing cards out into a row. And you get to decide as you're communicating how to play your cards out in this row. And that is the order that they will trigger. So you're trying to kind of say, okay, well, if you do this first, I can do this. This will create an opening or some synergies to do that. And then you act it all out. But as you play cards to that row, the more cards you play, the more enemy activation cards happen. And all of your cards will trigger, and then all of the enemy cards will trigger. So if you push your luck too far,
interesting.
If you just do a little bit, you only have to survive a little bit. But if you do a lot and you go for one of those big mega turns, you have to survive a slew of enemy attacks.
That's an interesting mechanism.
It is a
I don't
very
think I've ever
interesting,
seen that before.
It's a very interesting mechanism. And of course, like the theme is, it's called blood. I mean, you're fighting vampires and monsters, and it is very dark, but it's kind of playful too.
Also, side note, really cool side of the box. It looks like there's like little vampire teeth notched out of the lid that goes on. I know it's a silly little thing, but I love those sorts of things.
It's cool.
Speaking of silly little things, the last game we have is called Sling It. This is not even a board game. It's not even for the tabletop, but it is from the people who did Bop It.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
If you ever seen Bop It, like in Target or Walmart, it's that thing where you're like hitting it all different sides. You're bopping it.
You're pulling it, you're twisting it.
In this, you're slinging it, but it's entirely different. This is, I don't know if this is based on real stuff, but you're effectively slinging sausages across the room. Well,
so quite different from blood is what you're saying.
Yeah, quite different. It's not blood sausages. Anyway, this is like an outdoor game, kind of think cornhole or things like that, but you have these, they look like little bean bags that are supposed to be the sausages of different length, and you're throwing it at this sort of fold-out wooden board, pretty big thing, again, think cornhole, but it has these sort of slits in it that are just wide enough to not let the sausages go through, I think, for the most part. Maybe if you really chuck it, maybe it'll go through and that's not a good thing. But you want to get them to stick in there, and then the other player goes, and if they go above you, that's better. And I assume that they might slide down a little bit and stuff like that. The thing that they push significantly is the way it feels. It's very satisfying, and they talk about kind of being like axe throwing.
Yeah.
Because the way you're throwing it, it's kind of like end over end, and then whoop, like right there in the slot, and then it slides down.
Safer axe throwing.
And then across the top, there's these are the best shots you can get if you can get it to drape over the top, which is like, no one can go higher than that.
It seems silly, but there is a huge market for these games.
It does seem silly, but I love these things.
I do too. I love those. The game where you throw like the tennis balls and wrap them around. And,
I actually owned that one. It wasn't as good in practice as say like cornhole.
I have a cornhole set at home. Like we love these outdoor games. So like I think for sure I'm planning on getting this one and just adding it to that lineup.
So the last one we want to talk about very briefly is Night Shift. This is the campaign that's kind of controversial. A lot of people are talking about it. I just wanted to say one thing. We've seen a lot of conversation about this game. There's a lot of people sort of up in arms about it. There's a lot of people defending it, all those sorts of things, on all sorts of different metrics for sure. I just want to remind everyone, don't yuck on someone's yum. Don't Try not to judge people for the games they want to play or don't want to play. We had an interesting, healthy conversation in our Discord with a lot of our members. One of our members in Discord brought it up, and oh boy, did it explode into a big conversation.
Yeah, but a good conversation, a productive conversation.
It was a great, healthy, productive conversation. I want to commend everyone on our Discord for that. And in fact, if you're not on our Discord and you like the idea of healthy conversations about controversial topics, come over there and check it out. But like I said, try not to judge it too much. It does look like a game that has more meat to it than you'd expect. It doesn't look like it's a sensationalized shock value type of thing. Obviously, it is going to sell to some people based on the shock value. And again, shock value in and of itself is in the eye of the beholder.
But I gotta say, my only comment on this is just like with any board game, this takes place in a world that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And the people that designed it do. So
former worker in that industry.
At the very least, like being able to not judge it for its cover and play it, you might learn a thing or two about what that life is like. You know?
Exactly.
So I think you had a good point. Like, let's not judge too harshly. I see people calling it a cash grab, and it doesn't feel like one.
No.
It feels like this was a labor of love. So I think the important thing to remember, for any board game that comes out, there is a person that made it.
Yeah,
so remember that.
And there's people out there who will play it. If it's not you, then play another game. That's okay. Like we say here, have fun at the table.
Exactly.
I might change it to no judgment at the table.
Well, it's some judgment.
But it's not as catchy. Anyway, until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table and try to keep the judgment on the low end at the table too. We'll see you next time.